I'm Jake Groth. I'm with Defense Point Security. We are a cyber-only cybersecurity company. We were acquired about a year ago by Accenture Federal Services. So we're still a wholly owned subsidiary of Accenture Federal. And like I said, Defense Point Security. I'm the CTO of Defense Point. The title of this presentation is Use of Automation Orchestration to Take Responsive Actions at Machine Speed. By a show of hands, who here has heard of security automation orchestration platforms in general? It's kind of like it's the new, right? Cyber's all about the new. And that's really the next wave. Everyone's like, oh yeah, we're, machine learning, that's old hat now. Let's get into this new thing. So my presentation today is largely going to be focusing on the context of security operations because that's my background. However, these trends are applicable to any place that has procedures, playbooks, standard operations, all that stuff. So I say the times are changing. So traditional SOCs or any ops center really must evolve to become intelligent-driven with automation orchestration as a key enabler. So let's kind of tease that out. We'll talk about what a next generation versus an old generation looks like. So through that contrast, you can kind of see the difference. So let's walk through a traditional operations center, security operations center. So I'm an analyst. I'm a tier 1 analyst. I'm sitting there looking at a screen, and that's basically watching the alerts reactively come through where I'm getting fatigue, tons of alerts coming through. I'm incentivized through metrics to document those and send them back to tier 2, tier 3, and then eventually to instant response to corroborate that that actually is an event, and then move on. So I'm just throwing these back. And I'm on a shift, a 12-hour shift. I'm supposed to be focused on that 12-hour shift. Well, that eventually moves to instant response, and this response looks at that, and they do some more search. They do some more they search the logs to see the scope of that investigation. If other machines have been compromised with similar TTPs, and they wrap it up in a bow, and then they remediate the vulnerability or they remediate the incident, and then it gets filed away. Fast forward to the night shift. The incident response analyst is supposed to take that case and go to the engineering team and say, hey, we need to take these attributes, these indicators of compromise, and put them into our preventive stack, putting them into our AVs, putting them into our blue coats or our proxies or whatever to prevent this from happening again. Very few times it's a business, or quite often that's a business process, and that doesn't occur. He just focuses, I'm incentivized on closing this, the MTTR, right? Mean time to resolution. I'm focused on closing this out, and that's really the engineer's problem. He's also supposed to increase the fidelity of that alert by going back to the operations and increasing those alerts to make it so it catches more. Very few times does that happen. In fact, I would wager to bet in most people's organizations, if they open up like the AV signatures that they have in their environment and they open up all of the investigations they've ever done, and you look at those techniques, tactics, and procedures that the adversaries are taking against them, you map those out to the current signatures or on the preventative side, they rarely match. And that's organizational intelligence that's just wasted. Most of the time, people depend on just vendors, right? It's really a skill set problem. They don't really know how to articulate that investigation into a signature. So that's even for that shift. That night shift comes on, they do the whole whack-a-mole thing where they find it again 6 hours later, it gets corroborated, and it gets put back in the filing cabinet, and it just keeps going round and around like Groundhog Day. And that's just in one ops center, let alone multiple ops centers inside of an organization. So, the investigation training standardization. So, most of the time when people talk about this stuff, they talk about methodologies. Who here has heard of kill chain, right? Kill chain methodologies, all these methodologies are really great, but they rarely get transferred into any kind of technology that's implemented. It's usually the playbooks and stuff that you just document, and people are supposed to be documenting metrics and that kind of stuff that comes out of it, but the reality is it never gets transferred to actual playbooks that are used. Paper-based playbooks are incomplete and stale. I know that a tier 1 analyst gets brought on, they give them a handful of playbooks, and say, hey, this is how we do security monitoring. Rarely do they read it, and it rarely gets adopted fully, and they're usually stale, meaning, like, yeah, that's how we did it 3 years ago, but no one's gone through the energy of updating these playbooks. Does this sound familiar at all to anybody? Quality control. As a result, each analyst that's sitting in your ops center, his skill set is you're too dependent on an analyst skill set today, on a tier 1 analyst. Your mileage may vary greatly by each person that's on that shift. Day shift, I know because I staff them, day shift is usually the higher quality people. Night shift, they kind of hide some of the C students. That happens across most organizations. Lack of human capital in cyber. Who here has had a hard time recruiting for cybersecurity? I know, because I came to DC. I'm from California. I was part of what's called the Scholarship for Service program, where the government paid me to get a master's degree. You guys are from there? All right. Good job. Wow. See, it's working. It's actually, I think the government did this really well. Unfortunately, they didn't retain me, obviously. But I put in 3 years at the DHS SOC. So they have a huge, it was all one-sided benefit to me because of how much of a huge problem they have in recruiting in cybersecurity in general, not just in the government, but private sector. Lack of supply of skilled labor, highly skilled labor doing repetitive tasks. Huge problem. So let's say I'm a tier 3 guy and I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I'm really wasting his ability to start doing hunting, proactive type stuff, as well as just wasting a high bill rate or a high SME job doing the same things over and over again. No economies of scale. This is the biggest thing. I mentioned that example of that workflow for that security operations center. Imagine if you were able to combine multiple ops centers to get some economies of scale. Basically, it's just plugging away, plugging away. So the role of SA&O, as a part of this role anyway, is to remove slow manual analyst intervention from conventional event and threat response processes and replace it with machine speed decision making and response. Okay, so let's talk about what ISOC is. It's, the new intelligence SOC. Traditional knowledge stores are dead. I actually just went to a briefing on one of my clients had just spent years developing this portal that was just unveiled last week that they thought, they mapped out all the workflows their ops center did. Like, we're going to take these playbooks and we're going to make them into workflows. And they're going to document the investigation to the context of this workflow. Really, I really commend them for doing that, but it also is kind of like 5 years too late. What I mean by that is, if you're documenting an investigation and nothing is happening other than storing the value you just inputted, it's a complete wasted opportunity. If you're able to document, let's say indicators of compromise, or let's say I think there might be something bad here. I look at an alert, I start typing the IP address when doing the investigation. If the automation functions can kick in, hit VirusTotal, hit OpenDNS, hit all these things that you have to be able to get reputation in there, look at previous investigations, like I mentioned before about putting that in the filing drawer, look at previous investigations, wrap it up and provide some context to the analyst, some automation functions so that if you're ever documenting anything, all the things that you would do after that could be done automatically, just through API service bus stuff. Workflow composers. So basically your next generation system should have workflow composers that can WYSIWYG, what you get editors to be able to document what your workflow should do. Should translate it from the stale paper-based to the automated way. Crowdsource playbooks. This is a big trend that's happening right now that's really cool. We're going to show you some of this after the slide. Is that people are finding workflows that work. These integrations with these third parties like VirusTotal or OpenDNS or Volatility, Cuckoo Sandbox, all these technologies, they make these playbooks and they put them up on GitHub. And so other ops centers can be able to download those, modify them as needed, but you can really start seeing some economies of scale from a community, security community, not just inside your organization. Object-oriented methods. What I see in the industry right now is basically what programming languages were before object-oriented programming. All of those objects, those indicators of compromise, those playbooks, all these different things are being completely wasted in one-offs. They're like basically punch cards back in the day. Everything you're using is basically just for that investigation and thrown away. If you can actually store that, automate that, and then create building blocks, you can have a much bigger pyramid. Just like I mentioned with the crowdsourced playbooks, if I can start an operations center, download a bunch of playbooks the industry says are the way to go, then I don't have to spend all these cycles creating working groups thinking about the best possible workflows I could make. Metrics. I'm a big fan of metrics. That's the government. I don't know if you guys, where you guys are at now. When I first got there, they're like, okay, you need to learn ITIL. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And they kind of drilled that in my head. And as a technical guy, I was like, this is, I don't see the point in this. After a while, I realized you cannot manage an organization without metrics, high quality metrics. And security metrics are very difficult to articulate. So, have you guys ever heard the term high confidence content? Oh, I've got really high confidence content. I got really good searches. I got really good whatever. Well, how do you prove that? Just because, do you actually have a true positive rate? Like, do you actually have anything that backs that up other than the logic sounds good, right? when you're starting to document this stuff, the best part of it is that it's going to have exhaust, right? It's going to have all these analytical exhausts. You're going to start seeing playbooks that have high efficiencies, search queries that have true positive ratios. You can actually document inside the kill chain from the beaconing all the way back to the phishing email that it came from, where in that kill chain it actually was discovered, and then start doing ROI on tools. Right now, traditional SOCs basically just invest a bunch of money in tools, and then when they don't work, they go, and they're not integrated, they're like, oh, next tool, new, and they don't actually look at any ROI. Like, everyone's obsessed with buying IDSs, but if you actually look at it, how many investigations actually started with an IDS, right? That's the kind of stuff you don't want armed with because you don't have the metrics to support your thesis. Integrations, unified ecosystem, I mentioned that with the API service bus. Part of your SNO platform should have native integrations with all of your tools. That's how the machine speed is able to occur, is that when an event occurs, it needs to be able to interface with that downstream technology to really start getting economies with your tool sets. Machine learning AI, I just threw that in there to make sure that people are paying attention. Just kidding. All these metrics could also be called features in the machine learning world, and they'd be really great to be able to start classifying events. So that way, when you're documenting all this stuff, you realize this nation state or this group of this nation state have the same TTPs we've seen across all these different places that are being attacked. What is the overlying motive there? What is going on? You can actually start classifying that. This is what machine learning is really good at, is clustering and classifying behavior or features. AI is basically an element of that where it gets to decide what should happen now. It's smart enough to know what should happen, which playbook should be called. And after you have your high confidence content, you can say, I feel comfortable having AI decide on these curated set of content because they're generally considered high confidence based on previous investigations. Okay, I'm going to walk you through some crowdsource playbooks right now. This is a protected asset workflow. This would all happen at machine speed, and the thing in the middle, that's the DPS shield, that's an SANO platform. So that machine on the left, the little server symbol there, let's say that it's sending all its logs to Splunk or whatever your log management system, Elastic, it doesn't really matter. It's sending all that stuff there, and you created some high confidence content that said, if you ever see anything that looks like this, create an alert. When that alert occurs, send it to your SANO platform through an adaptive response. The SANO platform automatically create the ticket, the JIRA ticket in this case, automatically push that to AD for the user or the machine to be kicked off the network, and then send the command back to that machine to dump all of these forensic logs to a write-only data store. That could all happen with all without anybody, like they turn on the computer and realize, this happened, I guess now I can go do my investigation. The threat's been mitigated, and I have these great rich logs that haven't been tampered with. Another one, C2 malware. So that's a malware compromised machine. SourceFire sends that alert to Splunk or again, whatever your SIM is, or your log management system. The SNO platform extracts that file. DPS, we have our own custom Cuckoo, virus total, volatility, all in one box that doesn't have to beacon out to virus total because that's basically why they exist, to get attribution, right? So we do that in-house, but you don't have to. It detonates the file, grabs all of these objects, and you send it out to block the hash from your Windows server in a GPO. You send an email to somebody, and then you go back and you terminate the process in that workstation. That could all happen at machine speed. These are just examples. We could move any of these technologies around or workflows. These are just some that I actually have seen out there on GitHub. I've modified a couple of them because some of them didn't work. Phishing workflow. This is a cool one. So let's say you have an Exchange server. You can get the email from Exchange, detonate the file again with your Cuckoo, your Sandbox, your volatility, your virus total. You can also send it to OpenDNS to get IP reputation as well. Again, you can mix and match any of those with any technologies you have. Do a search query. I mentioned earlier a playbook is to gather scope of an investigation, get all the assets together to determine who is affected. You could have that same search with those same TTPs run against Splunk and say, these are all the workstations that are actually a part of that. And then it could actually run a playbook itself called the Investigate playbook, where it opens up an investigation through transfer that to a different workflow. And so when the analyst gets in there, he goes, oh, this has all been populated for me. Now I need to do something with it. And that workflow itself could have, the quarantining and all the other stuff, the remediation, the ticket generation. I mean, these are how object-oriented work. It just starts stacking on each other, right? They start linking together, just like variables, methods, modules, all that stuff. So you start really getting it. You start seeing, hey, I could do a lot with a lot less. I'm no longer dependent on tier one analysts and their noise that they create into the system. Anything else? All right, I appreciate you guys. Thanks.